The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services, a leading provider of quality and experienced virtual chief information security officers for small and mid-sized businesses. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Susan Richards joins us. She is the director of information security and has an extensive information security background. I know we've worked together on several initiatives. Susan, how you doing? Thank you for joining us.
Great, Greg. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I know some of your past and the path on how you got to where you're at. Because I know I believe we've served on, like, say, for example, the ISSA board before. That was like many years ago. But can you kind of go through a little bit of how you got started in IT and cyber and where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. I started way back in the 80s as an application developer, computer programmer, worked my way up through, team lead, system analyst. I was a database administrator for SQL Server for a while. Scrum Master, project manager. And, back when I started computer programming, it was before Al Gore invented the internet. So we didn't have to worry, and the modems aren't going to jump in and start hacking themselves. So we didn't really have to worry too much about anything other than insider threats and bulletproofing our code.
And so then that brought you to where?
Well, then I started at a small company, probably medium-sized company, as we had a web application that took credit card information. So my official getting into information security came from training our development team on OWASP top 10 defensive coding techniques. And it really kind of caught fire for me to understand all of the different threats that can be out there, and to try to take people like me who didn't believe it could happen and move us forward into thinking about those types of things and really evangelizing how information security can be so important.
And you are also an adjunct professor. And I know this because you were so kind to invite me once many years ago. It was BC, before COVID. It was actually right before COVID, if I remember correctly, to talk a little bit about risk management. So you did that for about a year or two?
Yeah, about 2 years. 1 year at Lipscomb University, I taught risk management, and then the following semester taught IT management, just IT management and planning in general. And then also for Nashville State Community College, but that was really more for just an introduction to computer applications. So it was not necessarily IT related people that were coming into it, but I still managed to put a focus in on making sure people were thinking of multi-factor authentication and being safe with any of their applications. I also taught at Nashville State Community College a project management course last summer.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. My master's is in information systems project management. And the only reason why I did that at Middle, instead of doing information security, information systems security, was because I already had my CISSP at the time. It sounded like it was going to be redundant. So what I always like to find out is this is sort of like my stock question at this point in time, because I get so many different responses, some of them the same, some of them like really thought out in different areas. But what would you think is like one of the most significant threats today to small and mid-sized businesses?
Well, I think it's the threats, there's always the standard, business email compromise and multi-factor authentication, but thinking through it from my perspective as coming up through computer applications and database administration, I really think it's understanding where your data is, the value that data has, and understanding who has access to it and who wants to have access to it. Because if you know where it is and where it's flowing to, you can be a better agent of being able to protect it versus not knowing that you even have a server, that's off somewhere doing something that's of value to you.
Okay, well, that's and you do an awful lot in the information security community here. I mentioned in the beginning that we've been on ISSA, and I wanted to touch briefly on this because one of the things that I know that you're involved with is planning the the conference here in Nashville. And for those who don't know, shame on you.
You will know.
But you will know. InfoSec Nashville is one of the largest and most well-respected one-day information security conferences in the Southeast. And routinely more than 500 folks are there. Excellent vendor sessions, excellent speakers. So how can you tell us a little bit more about InfoSec Nashville? What can we expect this year? When is it?
Sure. Well, let's start with this year, and then I can work back into how I even got involved in this crazy mess of wonderful people. But yeah, September 9th, so Friday, September 9th, just coming up in a couple of weeks. It's at the Music City Center. It's all day from 8 in the morning to 6 at night. We have 2 keynotes. I'm so happy to have Chris Cochran from Hacker Valley Studio and Anne-Marie Zettelmoyer from, let me make sure I got it right, Sci-Cognito. I was going to use enough. I know she used to be at, I think, MasterCard, and she's just recently moved to Sci-Cognito. So I don't want to misspeak on where she is today, but right. 2 really dynamic keynote speakers. So I've been involved at the board level with Middle Tennessee ISSA for about 10 or 11 years now. This year was not in the day-to-day running of the board, but just in working with a bunch of CISOs here in the Middle Tennessee area and helping drive some of the content of the conference to be meaningful to CISOs in the healthcare space and everything we do here in Middle Tennessee. So we were able to select, we had a good list of keynote speakers, and I was able to find out from the CISOs, who would resonate with them. And I was really happy that we got these 2 really great dynamic speakers. But yeah, in addition to the keynote, or the 2 keynotes, we have breakout sessions all day with different tracks so that you can customize the conference to fit you. We also have time for people to socialize. I know InfoSec, we don't typically socialize too much, but this is a good way at lunch. There's no sessions going on at lunchtime, so you can sit and chat with people. There's breaks during the day. There's a cocktail hour in the evening. And the exhibit floor itself I know the sponsors really like the exhibit floor because it's right there and it has traffic all day long. And we're very respectful as far as we don't hand out information of conference attendees to those sponsors. If you want to provide it to the sponsors, you're more than welcome to do so. So you can engage at whatever level you want to. But, for me, just going to a conference and sitting and listening to the content isn't nearly as engaging as being able to talk to people afterwards or during, getting the reactions during a keynote and things like that. So it's really good to be in person.
Yeah, and actually, not only is InfoSec Nashville one of my favorite conferences, but it was my first event back last year from being out from COVID. And it was the weirdest sensation. It's like I wanted to stay away from people. I'm backing up when they're coming up to me. And, some people can be close talkers, although I think that's kind of settled down a little bit now. But it was both a weird experience, but also a very humbling and very personally satisfying experience to finally see a lot of folks all gathered together in person, colleagues, friends, people that I've known for years. Do we have any COVID restriction protocol items this year that we need to think about?
That I don't know because I'm not on the day-to-day running of the board. I know our event management company does a lot of other events in the Nashville area. So anything that would need to be in place will be in place. But, we're IT people. So there's some days that you feel like hugging people and there's other days you feel like just going hi from a distance. And I think now it's perfectly okay. Our introverts were actually going to be set up very well for a pandemic because we already are germophobic, wash our hands all the time and keep our distance. So, I think we're good on that, but I think it's more socially acceptable now to just go, no hug today, I'll just say hi to you. So, and it's a really engaging, involved, concerned community. So, it's very respectful about that.
I know people when the gatherings first started again, people getting back together after the initial lockdown, slow down, whatever you wanted to call it. We all had sort of different ways to greet. There was the elbow, there was the fist bump. For me, I went Star Trek.
Exactly. You're like, hi. Yep.
But I loved it too, because I have to admit, and this is the first time I'm admitting it publicly, I'm a little bit of a germaphobe. And so the whole shaking hands thing, I'm kind of no, I'll do the fist bump or the Spock. So, Well, looking forward to that. And one of the other things that I'm excited to hear more about from you, and we talked about this just briefly before we started, was about HITRUST and the HITRUST users group here in Nashville and some other exciting things that are going around around that.
Yes, I started with HITRUST back probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. Didn't know really what HITRUST was. And I actually had asked a couple of friends within the ISSA community, am I limiting myself by going for a job that's 90% HITRUST? And I have to say, no, I'm not limiting myself at all, which has been great. But HITRUST is a control framework. It's built on ISO 27001, but originally was built for healthcare companies to be able to say, we're HIPAA compliant, because there's no HIPAA certification. And SOC 2s can be a little bit garbled when it comes to, or unclear as far as, you have to basically read the whole SOC report.
You're being very kind by saying that, by the way. It's a little garbled. I think I'll use that. So,
well, it's always been amazing to me that an unqualified report is actually a success, because to me, that sounds like you're not qualified to run that or to produce that report. So I'm always like, what is it with accounting? Why do they do that?
The first time I saw that, you just triggered some neurons from several years ago, because I'm like, oh, this is horrible. No, it's good. What are you talking about?
What do you mean it's unqualified? How could a qualified report is horrible? So it's that whole, gap accounting, and I'm like, generally accepted accounting principles, and you guys get away with that, so, and HITRUST basically was trying to take all of the different COBIT, ISO, PCI, all of the different regulatory frameworks and pull them in. And it's a really great way to customize, for your particular business, what security controls do you need to have in place? So you can use it as a risk assessment framework, or you can use it as a compliance framework. And I find I have, just my little team, and, we do HITRUST almost all day long, but it's hard to really understand, going to a conference like InfoSec, is anybody else using HITRUST? Do they have other questions? HITRUST conference has been online the last couple of years, so it's even hard to see, because an online conference, you don't necessarily engage as well. And so, my content management background, knowledge management background, I really was like, and everything I've seen with ISSA and the chapter and the active chapter membership that we have, I was like, we've got to be able to do something like this for HITRUST. So I went to the HITRUST Alliance and I asked them about, could I put together a user group, not sanctioned from HITRUST, not you guys, peeking in, but just for us to be able to lay bare the good and the bad about our experience with HITRUST. And they're all on board with it. We had our first meeting, our founding meeting, July this year at the Brentwood Library. So start small and move forward. Our next meeting is going to be in conjunction with the HITRUST conference coming up in October. HITRUST is again having it online, but I'm looking to get a organization here, VACO, or one of the other organizations here, to be able to have the keynotes at least broadcast, so we could be in a room together and watch the keynotes and then kind of talk about them afterwards.
That's an interesting approach. So it's an online virtual conference, but you want to foster a sense of community by bringing the new HITRUST users group here and watching that all together. I like that.
Yeah, and it's been nice, because HITRUST Alliance has said, you know what, people don't even have to be signed up for the conference if they want to come watch the keynote. They're like, we're that open to evangelizing this and kind of getting it off the ground for you. So yeah, so I'll have more details of that. I'll put together a Slack channel and get that going in more formal ways than just, a couple emails out to people that I know are interested, but more to come on that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. So anybody can join, like say someone who's not a member of the HITRUST users group can come and view that with y'all?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, at this point, we don't really have any kind of membership or application for membership for our users group. It's really just, if you're interested in HITRUST, if you're interested and you don't want to necessarily spend the money on the HITRUST conference, because, it's a 2-day and it's kind of a big ask to do that, but you just want to come meet some like-minded people. I'll have the details of that keynote as soon as HITRUST has the schedule out, and I'll get that out to you. I'm also thinking, you're inspiring me to maybe do some podcasts, to do some quick hits on, some of the frustrations or some of the reporting in HITRUST, some of the new features that come out, because they offer training, but 3 years between in-person training is a long time to go, and HITRUST is always adding new features. And so I've got one of my people that's in training this week, he's been working with HITRUST for about 4.5, 5 years now. And he's still pinging me with, hey, did you know we had this? Did you know it could do that? So it's really, it came from that idea to just do that in a more informal, easy access way.
Well, I think that's exciting about reaching out there, and particularly about the podcast. First of all, if you have any questions about it, let me know. And second of all, that's a nice little segue for me to do a little plug, saying, "Hey, have you tried Anchor from Spotify yet to do your podcast?" Because we talk about that in all of the audio ones, and at the beginning of the video ones as well too. Anchor actually really is a decent platform. That's what we use here for this podcast. So, well, that's good. I'm glad that someone like me can come. And not have to have a secret handshake or pay $150, $200 at the door or anything like that. So, so what about future plans? We kind of talked about this a little bit more. I know that you're very interested, at least I think I have this correctly, that you're very interested in election integrity.
I am. My husband has run for local office a couple of different times, and I started out first as a poll worker. And then have started getting involved with the Tennessee Election Integrity Committee and really working as a poll watcher. So for the longest time, Republican candidates were not allowed to have poll watchers. It was some legal battle that had happened in Delaware that poll watchers were not allowed to come, and finally they've lifted that. So you've probably seen an explosion of poll watchers in your local polling place if you're here in the Middle Tennessee area. And it's because of that. And so it's really understanding, what to look for. And, and it's funny because, most of the poll workers understand why we're there as poll watchers. And I've worked on both sides of it. And really for me, I want to be able to look at every single voter and say, your vote counted. And, I can be there to attest to that. It's not just taking the word of somebody that you don't know. We're here in the community doing that. I really think that InfoSec people have the right mindset for that. We audit, we review, we look for those vulnerabilities, and we can improve that process. So even if it's just something as simple as, having the registrar, when they take your information, ask you what your street address is, as opposed to providing you your street address, or that person who's taking your application and bringing you over to a ballot machine to say, similar to going to a doctor's office, hey, state your name and date of birth, just to make sure we have the right person and you're not voting on behalf of somebody else mistakenly, because that did happen actually in one of the most recent elections. There was at least one incident where somebody wasn't paying attention. They picked the wrong person. That person who got that application wasn't paying attention, signed their name to it. And so they voted as another voter. It was not it was not malicious. It was an unintentional insider threat, but it's something that we as InfoSec people would be alerted to and can say, hey, if you did that, if you had that machine operator taking that application and saying, give me your name and date of birth, they would have been able to stop that right there, gone and corrected it and brought it back. Because I know, being a poll worker, everybody has the best of intentions, and sometimes it's just the process gets in the way, and so you circumvent it, or sometimes the process just isn't trained to everyone, and so they don't know what the process is.
Well, I know there's been such more and more focus on election integrity. And for me, I first became, I think, more acutely aware back in the 2015, 2016 timeline. And one of the things that I noticed that I try to do now is that the process is different than what I remember a while back. And I guess it really depends upon what equipment, that folks use. But you go to the screen, you put in your choices, and then it prints out a ballot, and then you take the ballot to another machine, which then scans it in. And I guess from that point in time, you have then a record both of the electronic voting from the scan, because I don't think anything is actually captured in the screen itself. And you also have a paper backup for those manual counts that we've heard about. But I'll tell you one thing I never did up until, I don't know, I guess it would be 6-7 years ago, is actually look at the paper after I put in my stuff and make sure that it actually said the right folks on there. Because I think after the 2020 election, there were some instances where people were saying, no, I voted for A and B is on here. So I think that's another thing too, that it would be good as InfoSec folks to kind of use our knowledge and our ability to bring awareness. It's like, make sure, think before you click, think before you scan. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there is actually that ballot marking machine actually does capture an image of it. And so, and that's part of the audit process, is to make sure that, at some point, what's captured in that image on that machine matches what is in that paper and what is scanned. And so it's great now that we do have that paper, and it's been some of that, because 4 or 5 years ago, there was that uncertainty of, well, put it in the machine, hope it recorded it correctly, and it's gone now. And now there's a piece of paper. And yes, it is a matter of training your own family, and your own voters in your household and community to say, make sure you read that paper ballot, because if there is an audit, if there is a recount, sometimes they'll just recount from what the scanner says, but that you've always still got that paper to go back to and be able to look at it and say, yes, this was my ballot.
So if somebody wants to get more involved and more generally, since I have like 2 or 3 listeners outside of Middle Tennessee, something like that. What if someone wants to become more involved in the process of maybe being a poll watcher? How do they do that?
Well, like I said, there's poll workers. So that would be through your own local election commission.
Okay, yeah.
To sign up as a poll worker. Poll watchers, I know it's for us here in Tennessee, it's the Tennessee Election Integrity Committee or Commission. And, every state would have some sort of poll watcher organization. True the Vote is a big organization that can connect you with any of the organizations that would locally be in your area. And then, if you really want to take the big leap, be on the election commission for your local election, because those are appointed by, state and local legislators to say, here's the group of 5 that are going to be overseeing what the election commission does. But, at any level you're ready to engage, and also, to be part of witnessing the audits, when they certify the election, what that process is, and having that transparency to say, okay, from the, the polls close, they count them, and there were always the unofficial results. Well, what's that process of making it official? And, just be part of that process to say, hey, there's a new improved way we could do this, or here's something we could do. Here's how we could track if something goes wrong, and things like that. Because right now it's a handful of people that are going and doing that. And, I think our industry lends itself well to having that thought process to say, oh, I'm a Scrum Master, so I want a retrospective at the end. And I've talked with Chad Gray, our local election administrator, to say, hey, can we do a retrospective? I don't want to, I won't tell anybody, I'll sign any non-disclosure agreement you want me to. I just want your team to focus on what could happen better. And it's not necessarily because I think anything happened bad, but as a Scrum Master, I know everything can be improved the process. So, let's apply those same IT principles that we do here to, elections are now an IT process with all of the electronics that are in there.
Well, I know that it seems like more so than any time in my life that there is a lower confidence in the electoral process. And sometimes I think that people are looking outside to get that confidence back, where really the more that you can get involved and see it for yourself, the more you can realize, okay, what is working here is working. So
correct. Yeah.
Good
Because
information.
I only knew election day because that's the only time I'd ever worked as election day. And now I've watched for early voting. So I know more of that process. But yeah, I want to be able to stand up and say, no, our elections have the integrity that they need. I've proven that out. I've proven that to myself, and I can evangelize that to others. But I don't know what I don't know. So.
So a lot going on, and with everything in InfoSec, and then the volunteering that you've done through the ISSA with the conference and HITRUST, and through the helping with election integrity, what do you do to decompress?
Well, I have a comfort beagle. So she follows me around. You probably heard her earlier. She decided to get up and shake and rattle her collar a little bit. But my family and church keeps me focused. I sing in our choir at church. I crochet, which is a one needle form of knitting. And so I do that to kind of relax. I read a lot. mostly fiction, because if I get too much into nonfiction, I can tend to get a little overzealous about whatever it is. Like Checklist Manifesto, I just started reading that, and I'm telling people, I'm writing a checklist for this, I'm writing a checklist for that, you need a checklist for this, and so I can tend to get a little bit overdone unless I'm reading fiction. But yeah, so I have 2 cats, a dog, family keeps me busy, church keeps me sane, and exercise when I can.
Well, Susan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I love catching up. Looking forward to seeing you over at InfoSec, and really appreciate your time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
And everybody stay secure.